Yes, no? I'm okay, thank God. Okay. So what it was I forgot I changed my audio settings. Knight knows this. I changed my audio settings for Siege when we did we were playing Siege for my voice mod, and I forgot to change it for the for the podcast. So, okay. All right, we should be good. Let me start this stream over for for those that don't know everything that's going on right now. Um, okay, cool. I don't Ixlena. I don't know who that is, but I'm assuming that's Jeremiah, but it might be. I don't know. Um, so okay, to start from the beginning. I just want to let everyone know now that you can hear me that Snoopy and I have been working on this um on the list, the forums everybody's had from before. So I've decided to do the entire forum, like run the entire forum for whoever this new person is in chat. I'm assuming it's um I thought it was Jeremiah. I don't know who it is, but I do have Venom on that list. I will eventually talk about Venom. Unfortunately, I haven't read enough Venom comics to cover him throughout the podcast for today, but I will eventually get to Venom. He's on my list for upcoming characters. Um, I have a big list of characters to talk about. And I'm gonna plan on get through everyone that was in my Google form from before. Characters like Venom, Silver Samurai, Iron Fist, Kang the Conqueror. Those characters, I do eventually plan on doing streams for them. But I did want to talk about the Marvel universe like as a whole for today. Being that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is starting to grow, and they just came out with that whole multiversal war kind of thing, I figured it'd be best to talk about Marvel and the creation of like Marvel's history, like not like the figurative like Stan Lee and whatnot, but I mean like the actual timeline lore of Marvel's universe. So in order to do this, I have to explain to you that there have been 8 iterations in total of Marvel's universe, and um, we have to talk about Universe 6 specifically, right? So in Universe 6, right, Universe 6 ends, and then the universe that we know in the comics is Universe 7, right? And then in 2015, Secret Wars happened, and they rewrite the entire universe as one, and that's the universe we're in now in the comics, right? So with Universe 6, um, pretty much towards the end of it, the Dweller in Darkness, who is the villain from Shang-Chi, the giant dragon that steals the soul of like all the cool villains, um, he kind of feeds off of the fear of people in the universe. Specifically, he's from the Ever Nigh dimension and uses his powers to absorb their fear, which gives him more power, right? He attempts to use his power right after he gains enough of it to rule over all the multiverses by breaking what's known as the M-Cron crystal. If you guys have seen X-Men, you'll know what this is, like the cartoons from the 90s. So he does so, and it pulls in all the universes, causing an incursion, leading to there just being one main universe that he can rule over, right? But the Dweller in Darkness was stopped by the Phoenix Force in an effort to prevent the destruction of the multiverse. However, he broke the crystal, and it was kind of too late. Like the universe was already gonna explode, and there was no stopping it. So the universe 6 was ending, and universe 7 was set to begin, right? And universe 6 is very similar to our universe. It has all the same characters, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Spider-Man, all their villains. Um, but universe 7 was set to begin, and one man in specifically was getting ready to try and save his universe. This man was named Galen of the planet Ta, and Galen was the most like Ta, like he lived on Ta. He was really smart, and Ta was set to be one of the most technologically advanced planets in the known universe. But no matter what Galen did, he couldn't actually stop the destruction of his own universe. And at the end of the universe, he was kind of like stuck in space. So um, when the universe kind of was ready to die, um, the sixth version of Eternity kind of merged with Galen, and he would be born into the next universe inside, like trapped inside this egg, like giving like a cosmic egg with like immeasurable powers. So here is the cosmic egg, and some clickbait with this weird looking lady from the 60s. Anyway, as the I did the joke while I was muted. I did like an explode joke, but you guys, it's too late now for that. It's not funny anymore. But anyway, the egg kind of explodes and there's a big bang, right? And it causes the birth of the universe. And the first being to emerge from those, or beings to emerge from the main gods, or would from in this new universe would be those main gods. So you have like eternity, infinity, and they control space and time. And then eternity would spawn in his children's enmity, empathy, expediency, eulogy, epiphany, entropy, and eventually eon as well. And these are all like gods that control aspects of like space and time, right? Gravity, that kind of stuff. And here is I'm pretty sure this is eternity, and they also for its epoch, epic. And they all represents different aspects of life, and then they're also joined by Master Order and Lord Chaos, right? These are the big Marvel gods. If you guys remember all the way back to my Loki episode, I covered God of Stories Loki, and when Loki realized that gods were like all bullshit, he and like became number one. The gods like of like Master Order, Lord Chaos, and um what's this? Who's this? Eternity. We're all kind of like, yo, you gotta fix this shit because you know can't rule over everything. It was all just like a white canvas. Um, but at the focal point as well was Nemesis, and Nemesis had complete control over the aspects within the Infinity Stones: space, time, reality, soul, mind, and power. But she existed as the pretty much one of the sole entities in existence, and she was pretty much lonely, right? So she wanted to end her loneliness by splitting herself into six infinity gems or stones containing a portion of her power, and she would split off into each of the multiverses so that she could be everywhere all the time at once. This is Nemesis, right? And all of these stones, and each of the stones would be different colored for different aspects of life, right? Or like the colors in the MCU are different from the ones in the comics, and it's because like the gems are different depending on which dimension you go to. And then some of the other gods here are Oblivion, who is the point at the end of the universe, like when the universe ends, right? It will literally, quite literally, begin again and end and begin and end. That's how we have 7 or 8 universes. Oblivion controls the like point of the end of the universe, right? Like everything around this singularity. You have Lady Death, who is Deadpool's lover. She is another one that is a thing. The Phoenix Force, who is an omnipotent energy-based being. She controls all aspects of energy, psionic energy, everything that is, can be, and will be relating to psionic energy or psychic energy. She controls, and other beings like the Living Tribunal and whatnot. That will and like god level characters, Cronus, right? That kind of stuff, who would become immortal, and there's also you also start to see the rise of characters like the Elders of the Universe, who are also an immortal race, and were advanced, and they used kind of like their technology to help advance other civilizations that would rise and fall, and um they thought of themselves as a force for good, right? Calling right. So you had this group of people, right? They would use their technologically advanced and use their powers for good. They thought of themselves as a force of good and helping others by gifting technology. These people, they were called the Watchers, right? And they would evolve and become better. However, one of the people that they kind of helped evolve, they ended up one of the like races. They ended up killing themselves with nuclear weapons, and the Watchers ended up like backing off, and they're like, we are just gonna go to do what our name says, and we are just gonna watch. We're not gonna interfere with anything going on, and they sent out like one to every quadrant of the universe or whatever. And while the Watchers grew, so did another species further in space, the Celestials, who developed so much with their technology that they literally didn't need a corporeal form. They were literally just beams of energy within suits of armor, right? Um, but because they didn't have bodies, they could no longer reproduce the way you normally would, right? So, here are some of the Celestials, right? You have the one above all, Toa, right? One of the strongest Celestials. What is that? That's Esson the Searcher, Zirian the Tester, Arishem the Judge. He was the one, the big red one in the Eternals movie that judged. Um, Gamenon the Gatherer. They have like really hard names to pronounce. Gemini the Analyzer. Um, the Surveyor. Bizarre the Calculator. Boeg the Prodder, and Hargan the Measurer. They have like really fucking ridiculous names, bro. But these are the 10 main Celestials, right? And at the height of their civilization, right, there were billions of them. But they ended up going to war with a species known as the Aspirants, who had this thing called the God Killer armor, right? And the God Killer armor wiped out the Celestials, right? And um, like their numbers, but a couple of them emerged, right? You still have these main 10 guys, and obviously, as we know from places like the Eternals, the Celestials did win, right? They wiped out the Aspirants and left them with nothing but like records of who they were, right? And so, following all of this, right, Galen of Ta was set to be reborn, right? And he had, while he was in the egg, he had built a suit to regulate the energy that he had, but he was also kind of hungry, right? He hadn't eaten in a while, and he needed to feed off of the energy of life-giving planets, right? His first being Archaeopia, a planet which was in the midst of a civil war, and so Galen kind of spawned there and was like, "Oh, lucky me." The planet then they were in civil war, and then they saw like Galen, and they're like, "What the hell?" And Galen ended up eating the planet entirely, shredding his previous persona, and he then became Galactus, the consumer of planets. Yes, Galactus is nothing more than a dude from another planet. Um, he is the lone survivor of his of the last universe. Um, and so while Galactus fed, the Celestials began to place seeds in these life-bearing planets to spawn more Celestials. That's how Celestials are born. If you guys remember in the Eternals movie, they would put a seed inside a planet, and then sorry for anyone that hasn't seen the Eternals, but the Celestial would come out of said planet, right? Um, but Galactus, like, if you guys remember from the Galactus episode that I covered, he isn't a force for evil. He's kind of like a wolf in a pack of sheep, right? He's meant to herd, like he's like a natural predator meant to like keep the population of the Celestials at a bare minimum, right? Like keeping them in check. So it's why he's not really a villain, right? I mean he is because he kills people in these planets, but technically he's the same. He's as much of a villain as a wolf is to a pack of sheep, right? He is a natural predator to the Celestials and maintains their numbers by feeding off of said planets. And so, while this went down over in space, down on Earth, we begin to see the beginning of Neanderthal. Monkey Man learns to walk. And not only do we see the beginning of Neanderthal, but the beginning of pocket dimensions, right? These pocket dimensions serve as small sections of reality accessible through rifts in the space-time dimension, right? So you can kind of picture it as a like fabric of cloth that you rip, and have like a little pocket dimension that you can slide into, right? Um, and so most of those dimensions they didn't have any life, but Earth began to form life, like I said before, and Earth had a natural affinity for magic. So its magical prowess allowed for the rise of certain elder gods, such as Gaia, Chthon, Set, and Oshter. So you have if I'm not mistaken, this is Gaia, Chthon, Set, and Oshter, right? Gaia and Chthon are the main ones. Gaia is the only female in the group. Chthon is the literal dark demon, who, if you guys remember from Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, is the one that originally wrote the Book of the Damned, the I forget the actual name of it, the Book of the Damned. Um, this is you can remember Set because he's a snake, and then Oshter is the only one left. But pretty much, while you have the Elder Gods, you also have the rise of a bacteria, who is super important. I promise you, this tiny, insignificant bacteria is the most important player in World War II. His name is Sublime, and he is just kind of chilling for like a billion years, watching these Elder Gods and everything happen on Earth. And the Elder Gods, right? They began to fight amongst themselves, specifically Gaia and all the other ones, right? They were kind of becoming demons, right? These gods were turning and becoming demons, and so what Gaia did was she spawned the sentience of Earth, right? Known as the Demiurge, right? And so what that pretty much means is she birthed or she spawned in Earth's like human mortal form, and that was the Demiurge, and the Demiurge mated so that the Demiurge can have a mortal form, and then the Demiurge went after these gods and trapped them in said pocket dimensions. I don't know who typed this, but I'm super upset at whatever the hell that what that meant. But okay. Um, right. So you have these gods fleeing to pocket dimensions. So the gods that you're thinking of are Chthon, Dormammu, the Vishanti, Sidorak, and Mephisto, right? And pretty much when the Demiurge won, he kind of flew back into the sun and disappeared. And that's the last bit that you see of the Demiurge, and all the gods are elder gods are kind of gone except for Gaia. She will come in later with yeah, I figured. I love you too, Emmanuel. Gaia will come in later with the rest of the normal gods that you know of. But while this is happening in another dimension, right? I'm gonna say that a lot. Thanks, Manny, for the follow. But while this is all happening on Earth, in another dimension, the dimension of Asgard is beginning to form, right? And so Asgard's origins in Marvel are purely based on mythology. So you have two sides of the planet, the north being the frozen land and the south being a burning wasteland. And they have 12 rivers, and all these rivers meet in the middle, right? And they kind of keep each other in check, right? You have cold and hot coming in and cooling each other off. But over time, these frozen rivers, right, are overpowering the south. So what that means is that um, it gives way to the birth of the first frost giant, Ymir, right? If you guys play Smite, you'll know who that is. He's the big buff guy with the stick. But Ymir is the first frost giant to be born, and he is born on Asgard, right? But as he's exposed to the winds, he begins to melt, and he is left to be from the frost giant. He becomes a man and a woman, right? And so um, the man and the woman are alive and they need nutrition, and they are the absolute luckiest man and woman on Asgard, as there is a random cow that spawns in with them, right? Um, they had one of those Minecraft eggs, and they just kind of placed it, and a cow formed, right? And this cow would be the form of substance for that man and woman named Adumbla, and all the giants, they would come and drink from the cow, and the cow would lick away at the ice, right? And when the cow licked the ice away, it melted a man named Buri, right? She was licking at a specific spot, and then it licked away, and a man was like, he came out of the ice, kind of like Captain America did, and this man was Buri. And Buri birthed the child Bor, and Bor ended up founding and creating Asgard, and he had Vili, Kul, Ve, and Odin. And then Odin would later rise and mate with Gaia to birth Thor. Yes, Gaia, the elder god, making Thor technically half human as well. Technically, if you consider it that way. And so, while Thor and Odin would see their rise, you would also see the rise of a species known as the Zorians. And the Zorians are what you would call here, real quick before I talked about the Orions, here's Asgard, right? But the Zorians are the the species that are kind of like the common ancestor to anything that walks on two legs, except for the Asgardians because they are separate. But anything that walks on two legs, in Marvel, are pretty much their ancestors are Zorians, right? If you look at the Kree, the Skrull, the humans, those are the main ones. The Shi'ar, they are the main species to come out of the Zorians to like split off to be Zorians, right? And each of these evolved and began to form their own kingdoms, right? And so with this, right, we come back to the Celestials who have now made their way to Earth, right? And they kind of found Neanderthal or Homo habilis, whatever you consider to be the human-like monkey species creature thing on Earth. It's probably like Homo habilis because they're all still like barely erect. But um, what they do is they're like, well, this is a life-bringing planet. Let's put a celestial egg in it, and they do. And then a bunch of other Celestials come in and they're like, we're gonna run some tests on these primitives before our buddy comes out of that planet. So, because the Celestials are naturally scientists, right? So they split this group, right? And the group follows Gaia. So they take this group followed by Gaia and they split them off into three subsections, right? So, um, you have Homo Immortalis, right? And Homo Immortalis is the Eternals, right? You have Homo Descendus, or the Deviants, and um, then there was this latent gene that would be put into the other group, and they would like be humans, right? And that latent gene would cause known as the X gene would cause mutations to occur inside of humans, right? This would later evolve into mutants and whatnot. And it's always passed down via the sex gene that is the X gene, right? So in females it's XX, in males is XY, right? So it's why females you can either get them from like those genes can be passed down more commonly in like mutants in females because they get two sets of the X gene, males get one. Anyway, you have the deviants, right, or Homo descendus, right? We'll call them the deviants. Representation of instability, and they were made by Zirian the Tester. And the deviants would have half the lives, or like they would have half lives of humans, meaning they lived shorter lives. But with each generation that they mated, they would live their life expectancy would rise, right? So they would kind of mutate and live longer each time. And then you have Nazar the Calculator, and he would create the Eternals. They were perfect beings, incapable of evolving further. They're literally perfect. Nazar the Calculator would create the Eternals, and again, no longer needing to evolve, they can manipulate cosmic energy, and they have a bunch of powers. Flight, laser beam, super strength, pew 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 fingers that Gilgamesh has or whatever, or Kingo has. Different powers that they can manipulate. And you have Oneg the Prober, by far the most important person in the lives of humans in Marvel, as he adds that latent gene, allowing humans to infinitely mutate for different versions of humans, different possibilities of humans. And here's an image of them. This is the Deviants, the Humans, and the Eternals. Obviously, the Deviants are going to look disgusting, the Humans are going to look like apes, and the Eternals are going to look like Aryans. Anyway, you have the Deviants who start building weapons and, trying to amass an army. The Eternals who pretty much are kind of like, peace out, bro, we're going to live in space. And the Humans who are monkey, smash you with rock kind of thing. And so, again, the Celestials wanted to protect the celestial egg that was implanted on Earth, but the three species here, they gave in to their innate desires, right? They're human. They are technically human, and they gave in to their human desires, right? So the Eternals kind of self-isolated. They went into the sky and built their own kingdom in the sky, right? They would live carefree and give zero shits about what's going on to the Deviants and the Humans, right? But on the ground, right, the Deviants were ruthless, and they enslaved the Humans and forced them to build weapons, right? And the weapons would later be used against the Celestials when the Celestials would return. So the Celestials would return 3 times, and on the 3rd time, Arishem would judge Earth, right? The 2nd time, when the Eternals would come down, the Deviants plan on using their weapons on the Celestials, right, to take them over. The Deviants would then revolt against their old master, but they were completely devastated. They had absolutely no chance against a literal being made of energy. And what ended up happening was the Deviants went underground, they hid away, and the Celestials were like, the Eternals, they were like, whoa, that shit's crazy. You saw they just wiped out. I know a place we can go to. It's a moon on Saturn named Titan. Let's go there. And so they all head off to Titan. It's an important place. You should remember it because it is super important. And so with no Deviants and no Eternals, there's just the Humans or the unaltered Humans, and they would begin to expand and build their kingdoms, praying to gods in different cultures. So you have gods like Khonshu from Moon Knight, or Jesus Christ, or gods like Bast, the Panther Goddess. You'll see them all later. But they would give way to the beginning of different cultures. And like I mentioned with the Zorians, the Humans weren't the only ones that expanded from said race. There were 2 other in particular. The main ones being the Kree and the Skrull, which from literally the birth of their planets were at war with each other, basically. So here is the Kree and the Skrulls, and what we do is we start off with the Skrulls on the planet Skrullios in the Andromeda Galaxy. The Andromeda Galaxy is an actual thing. I'm pretty positive Skrullios isn't, but if NASA decides that they find a planet with a reptile on it, I pray to God they name it Skrullios. It'd be super cool if they did. But anyway, on Skrullios, the Skrulls were no different to the reptiles you see on Earth, except for the fact that they could walk on 2 legs. But just like humanity, the Celestials came down, took a group of them, and said, let's do the same exact shit we did with them. And they took half of them and left them unaltered, another half, or a third, I guess, left them unaltered, another third, and mutated them to be perfect. And in the middle third, they were like, see these Deviants over here, let's not do what we did before, because they're going to revolt. Let's make them all shapeshifters. Let's do that. And so, they all kind of had different abilities, right? They created the Deviants, who could shapeshift, the Eternals, who had god-tier superpowers, and the base Skrulls were kind of like, meh, right? And their entire history is kind of lost in time. But what we do know is that, unlike the human Eternals, the Skrull, who, they left and didn't give a damn, the, Deviants and the Eternals on Skrullios were actually at war with each other, right? And it was pretty bad. The entire Eternal Skrull planet died, and it only left a few of those Eternals, and the Skrulls that were Deviants that could shapeshift. They were the winners, right? And you have one Eternal Skrull left named Klibbin, and the queen of the deviants that could shapeshift, Sliggert. And Sliggert and Clibin married together, made a truce with the Eternals, and all the remaining Skrulls would come together under that marriage, right? And believed in a specific ideology. Now, this ideology is literally in every single goddamn species from here and into the next 1,000 species that I cover in this freaking podcast. You have the idea that there's a religion known as the Book of Worlds. The religion name will change, but on Skrullios, it is the Book of Worlds, and their job is to expand and rule over all the planets. Literally, every other species has this idea. Like, hey, we should rule over everybody else. So, as they expand their empire and the Skrulls expand, the Skrulls that kind of like later in the generations come up are kind of like disillusioned with this Book of Worlds. They believe that it's not a real thing and that nothing is going to happen. And so they went to again another civil war, and they would continually go into civil wars multiple times, each time coming out more and more technologically advanced until they became like super space bearing, where they could go to different galaxies and whatnot. And so what you end up having is the Skrulls landing on what would be a primitive Hala, right? And so the Skrulls were more technologically advanced when they would land on Hala to find two species, the Kree and the Katati, right? And so living together, the Kree were these human beings, right? No different from us. And then you have the Katati, who are kind of like trees. They kind of look like Groot. And so the Skrulls were kind of like, we're more technologically advanced, but there's two intelligent species on this planet. So we kind of have to figure out which one's the better one, right? So the Skrulls, again, realizing there's two, they make a test to better, to see who's better, and they take them and bring them to the blue side of Earth's moon. This isn't a real thing, but in Marvel, there is a blue side of the moon that is breathable, and a lot of shit goes down there. It's where the Watcher lives. But the Skrulls bring them to the blue side of Earth's moon, and the Skrulls are like, we'll be back in 2 years, build us something cool. And the Kree are like super enraged, right? They're like fuck this, fuck you, we're not gonna do anything. And the Skrulls and the Katati, they're kind of like building shit, but they're like, well, I ain't gonna do this anymore. And so the Kree would kill, when the Skrulls come back, would kill the Skrulls and the Katati, take all of Hala for themselves. Here is them killing the Katati and the like plant people running away back there. And they would end up stealing their ship and returning back to Hala from the moon and start decoding the Skrull language, right? To reuse their technology for themselves and expand the Kree Empire, right? And then, as the Kree expanded, the Skrulls were like kind of pissed off. They're like, yo, what the hell? You're supposed to be under our like watch. We're supposed to be the ones like better than you guys. We're dominant. And so the Kree Skrull War began, and as many times as the Kree could, they would come in and infiltrate the like the Kree would kind of break into the Skrull ships and steal their shit because they were more, again, the Skrulls at this point were more technologically advanced, but the Kree were kind of developing, right? And as the Kree expanded, the Skrulls found a way for them to open a dimension, right? And they realized that they could use this power to win the war, the Kree Skrull War. But what they didn't realize was they opened the portal to a place known as the Beyondverse, right? And they took a thing out which pretty much gave them a fraction of the Beyonder's powers. Now, the Beyonder lives in another dimension, and I will promise to talk about him in another time. I'm definitely not talking about him here because it's really long. But he is all-powerful. He is the main villain in the first Secret Wars, if you guys remember when I covered that on stream. But it takes place, and it forms itself into a perfect cosmic cube, right? And so the cube has sentience and maniacal tendencies. And the Skrull leader who had it ended up kind of eliminating 2/3 of the Skrull universe. And after rebuilding it, of course, the Skrulls are like, this shit's too powerful, fuck this, and they threw it back away. Um, and the Kree realized like they had their queen, right? The Skrulls have their queen and a leader, and the Skrulls ended up tapping into some sort of crazy power, right? What if we have a leader like that's just as smart and just as good as their leader, but not dumb enough to have like something super OP, but still strong enough that we can wipe out the Skrulls. So, um, the Kree realized again they needed a guide that wasn't driven by betrayal, like the Skrull leader did, and so the Skrulls end up, or I'm sorry, the Kree end up making this thing known as the Supreme Intelligence. If you don't know, do I have a picture of the Supreme Intelligence? I do not. Let's show you a picture of the Supreme Intelligence. This is the Supreme Intelligence. This is what it looks like in Marvel. In Captain Marvel, it's this chick. Pretty much when you look upon it in like your head, it's whatever you imagine it to be. It's whatever you want it to be. But this is what it actually looks like. It looks like a giant head with fucking weird things come out of it. This thing. This is Supreme Intelligence. It's like a head in a tank. It's actually pretty cool. And it's the smartest being in the Kree army, and it's pretty much a supercomputer. And it's the ruler of the Kree, and it starts to develop certain projects to try and expand the Kree. But what it ends up realizing is that if it expands, it it'll be too much for the Kree, and they'll end up killing themselves. They'll wipe themselves out. So it starts cutting off projects left and right. But there are 5 projects that it can't cut off in time, right? The most important one being the Inhuman project, right? And I'll mention that in a bit later, but um, you know, the Kree end up coming along this relic, right? Similar to the Cosmic Cube, but they believe they have space explorers and whatnot, and they find this relic, and they believe that they can use this relic to alter the way the war is being fought, right? They think that they can use this to win the war, right? And so like this random Kree guy, no name, comes across this relic, and the relic is known as the Crystal of Ultimate Vision, and it allows for the manipulation of the known universe, right? But he denied the temptation and its power and gave into the basic instincts of the gem. And it is a very powerful, very like pulling in of an item. And when the Kree guy grabbed it, he forced because all he wanted was the pursuit and the evolution of the Kree. He forced the Kree to be unable to evolve anymore. They are incapable of evolving any further to the point that they are. Here is the Kree, or they're talking about the temptation of its power. It is called the what the fuck is it? Like the crystal, whatever. The crystal of ultimate vision is the name of it. And do I not have a picture of it? Crystal of ultimate vision. Wolverine ends up grabbing it later on. It kind of looks like this. It's pretty cool. Um, but yeah. Again, they're unable to further evolve, but as the Kree planned, like I mentioned before, they plan on following in the steps of the Celestials and messing with human genes, and so this allowed them to take they'll mess with the genes inside of the humans and allow them to form like bonds within other races to then try and take them over from the inside, right? That's their plan. They come in, they bond with the society and infiltrate them from the inside by making half Kree, half XYZ species version of that. So, um, again, like I mentioned, the Supreme Intelligence saw this and was like, it's too late. We have to stop them before they go in and do these projects. And so you have 5 different projects that he couldn't get to stop, and so it would be right, and it right. These would be Primitive Man, the Badoon, which I mentioned in the Nova episode. The Dire Wraith, who are kind of like Skrull vampires. The Centurions, who are it's Yondu's species. You think of Yondu, and the Chameleons, who are, if you think of chameleons, they're that. Um, but on Earth, the Kree experiments would be under a guy named or a group named the Reapers, and they would discover, or you know they would keep an eye on the scientist A um Randak Randak, I think that's his name, Randak, and he would discover the Terrigen crystals, and the crystals would synthesize and terrigenicize and change humans, further evolving kind of the humans. Now, this couldn't work on Kree, but it would work on humans, allowing them to gather forms of great, like either gross, disgusting forms, like monster-looking things, or super cool abilities. And so they would begin to form like these human-like people with Kree powers would eventually form a society and a monarchy, and they would later come to be known as the Inhumans. Right? Here is a list of different characters who are Inhumans, with Black Bolt being the king of the Inhumans. This is not Doctor Doom, by the way. Or it might be, but it might be like a different version of Doctor Doom. You have Quake, Crystal, Lockjaw, Quicksilver, um Terror Girl, I forgot her name, bro. Um his wife, Medusa, Ms. Marvel, Moon Girl, and Devil Dinosaur. Awesome comic, I'm not gonna lie, pretty fun comic to read. And then a bunch of other Inhumans back there. But as the Eternals came and whatnot, their technology was lost forever, and on Earth we turn back to Earth, and there's no one to judge Earth, right? Like, while these guys are at war, they have a purpose, right? On Earth, humans have literally no purpose. They're like, oh, ooh. So what do? They fall back into savage beasts, feral beings with no one to watch them, and this saw the dawn of the Hyborian Age, right? And so, if you guys don't know, the Hyborian Age saw the rise of characters such as Conan the Barbarian and Red Sonja. Did not Morgan Le Fay. That was later on in the boop, 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 boop. Sorry. You see characters like Conan the Barbarian rise. Yes, Conan the Barbarian is a Marvel named character, but you also see the rise of his wife Red Sonja, but also the first mutant and second generation gods, right? So we'll talk about the first mutant, Selene, right? Selene was pretty much an important figure within the first mutants. Now, I'm sure everyone there who is halfway knowledgeable on Marvel is like, oh, Micro. I thought it was Apocalypse that was the first mutant. You're wrong. That's number two, bro. Get your facts straight. Selene was number one because Hyborian Age is earlier than ancient Egypt. And so you have Selene, who is literally like I don't understand what's it like with mutants. Like the first one is always like the strongest one, and then like everyone now their abilities are like excess fat or like the ability to grow gills to breathe underwater. It's like these new mutants now have like the most absolute useless powers ever, but those first mutants are like god tier mutants. Like I promise you there's another mutant in here that I'm gonna talk about who has like an entire page dedicated to just their powers. Ridiculous. Um, but Selene is an important figure. Selene um is the first mutant, and she has a vampiric life force, right? Pretty much she can touch you and drain your life force from you. She'll suck you dry and take your life. Pause. Anyway, um she can also kind of like take a portion of it and physically control people, blah blah blah. But Selene will come to know during the 70s and 80s. Again, if you watch the X-Men, Selene will later join the Hellfire Club as the Black Queen, the rival to Emma Frost, right? And during her birth, she unintentionally absorbed and killed her mother, and the people there viewed her as a goddess. Their tribe leader forced everyone that wasn't like an important social figure to give themselves up for her to drain. And this is her, Lady Selene. Clickbait, please. Anyway, um, she would again later siphon your powers by touching you. But like and she would be the first mutant later, um, and she'd have her rise and fall. But you'd also see the rise of the second generation gods that we know today. The Norse gods, Odin and whatnot, the Roman gods, the Greek gods, and other cultural gods, Indian gods, that kind of stuff. And they had existed before, like the Norse gods on Asgard, but were now ready to begin their interaction with society. Here are some of those gods. You have the Mayan gods and whatnot, like those ancient kind of gods. And many of these people began to pray to gods around the year 5000 BC. We see ancient Egypt, right? These people are starting to praise gods, and the gods would, you know, you'd have these gods that were like incarnation on earth kind of thing, and you'd have one poor baby boy, born in ancient Egypt to unknown people, but he was kind of blue, like not depressed. His skin was literally blue. And this baby would go on to have like a billion different names, but his birth name would be En Sabanur, which in Egypt it translates to the first one, but he isn't because Selena's. But it's his name is like a conjunction upon itself because it doesn't directly translate into ancient Egyptian. It translates to Arabic, which didn't come until 600 AD, which is like a ton of years before ancient Egypt. And also Arabic isn't the language they speak in Egypt. And so in Arabic it translates to morning light and has nothing to do with any of his powers. Also, he isn't the first mutant. But um throughout a bunch of later years, you guys would come to know him as Apocalypse, right? Here he is, Apocalypse, or as they have like this weird symbol now in X-Men that they call him. It's like or some shit like that. But because they have their own language now. But following his rise, you know, through childhood and his escape from Egypt, Apocalypse would roam the world, forcing civilizations to fight each other to eliminate the weak from the gene pool, and leaving only the strong, as he would become a warlord with a powerful army known as the Raiders of the Dark. And as he conquered the world, Apocalypse would later meet time travelers and other people. Um, Specifically, one time traveler known as Nathan Summers, the child of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, who is a clone. Madeline is a clone of the X-Men Jean Grey. If you read the X-Men comics, you'll know this. Um, what ends up happening is this is going to be a little confusing, so you gotta pay attention with me. Look at my hands, right? You have Mr. Sinister, who takes the genes of Jean Grey, um, and mutates it and clones Jean, right, to create Madeline Pryor. Now, Jean had died in the Dark Phoenix event, and so Scott was kind of boohoo depressed, and he went back to Alaska where he was born and met Madeline, and the two got together and created Nathaniel Summers, aka Cable. And now Nathaniel would have this disease where his body would start to turn into like a robot. So he would go into the future to have it cured. And in the future, he would live where the robotic disease would cure him. And he would pretty much be living his entire life in the 37th century with a literal iron fist. Not the hero, his whole arm and like half his body was made of iron. And all he knew was Apocalypse. Like in the 37th century, Apocalypse is the ruler of the world. And so that's the only thing he knew. He would join a group of freedom fighters known as the Askani and change his name to Nathan Dayspring, where he would later join the New Mutants when he'd go back in time. He joined the New Mutants with Cannonball Sam Guthrie. He would help him in the future because he believed Sam to be immortal, and the two of them could work together to fight Apocalypse. Blah blah blah. Anyway, Nathan would be known to us as the mutant Cable, who would time travel as to the past to kill Apocalypse. He wanted to kill Apocalypse before Apocalypse could rise and become this all-powerful creature. Now, what Cable doesn't know is that Apocalypse was inside of a celestial ship, right? That he was trying to access but couldn't communicate with. Because remember, the Celestials are beings of energy and machines, like inside machines, right? So, Cable, with his giant battle axe, because they didn't have guns back then, he would start fighting Apocalypse and they'd do battle. And Cable would actually win. He doesn't kill Apocalypse, but he messes him up pretty badly. But Cable is also pretty messed up. And so what ends up happening is Cable's blood mixes with Apocalypse's. And Cable has that robotic gene, right? That mutation that causes machineries to infect, like the machine robotic arm disease, right? And that would mix in with Apocalypse's genes, and the two would converge, allowing for Apocalypse to be able to communicate with the celestial ship, right? He would later then, at night, speak to a celestial who, by the looks of it, was Arishem the Judge, because it was like that bright red. Um, and they struck a deal, which allowed him to use their technology, but also give him the powers necessary for world domination. If Cable didn't time travel, Apocalypse would not have existed. Cable realized that his actions caused the rise of Apocalypse, which is the name of the comic that you see this story in. Highly recommend you guys read that. Here is Cable, and we leave Earth to talk about another species. This one is known as the Shi'ar. I know, guys, there's a lot of shit going on here. If you guys have any questions about anything that I've ever spoken about just now, I am still reading chat, so you guys can feel free to type, and I will answer any questions. This was really fucking confusing, because it dealt with time travel and shit. But we'll move on to the Shi'ar, and they're exactly like the Kree. Here they are. And so its origins with the Shi'ars are two members, Shara and Kithri. They're powerful members of the race, and they came together to be married, but they were always opposites, as one was a force of good on Shi'ar, and the other one was or Shara, I guess was the name of what the fuck was the name of the planet, whatever. One was like a force for good, and the other one was a force of evil. And so when they got married, they kind of like ended their bloodlust and their fights, and one of them, right, someone at their like wedding party gave them the reformed M'Kraan crystal, right? Which, like I mentioned, allows for reality warp. It's the thing that the Dweller in Darkness wanted to control reality. On its own, the M'Kraan crystal allows for people to travel within a multiverse, as it is often referred to as the nexus of all realities. If you guys remember WandaVision, that like pill commercial, the nexus of all realities is what that's referring to. Now, it was viewed as a sacred artifact by the Shi'ar, and just like the Skrulls' goal to expand the universe, the Shi'ar wanted to expand its ranks by marrying into other species, right? So, the way this kind of differs, right, is from the Kree and from the Skrulls, who are also looking to expand, is that the Skrulls are looking to just wipe everyone out, and the Kree are looking to infiltrate from the inside. The Shi'ar, however, are looking to expand their civilization by marrying into another civilization and getting their leaders to follow in the Shi'ar crown, right? Little different. Still, they're infiltrating society. Um, but um, the Shi'ar, as they grow and as they expand their army, realize that they need people to start following the crown. The crown can't be weak, because then people would revolt and try and take over forcefully. So, in an effort to secure their rule, they created the Imperial Guard. And what the Imperial Guard is, it allows for one member, the strongest member of a planet, to join the Imperial Guard. It is a high honor, and the strongest, they'd reward the planet, blah blah blah. And the Imperial Guard were a small group, but they were the strongest fighters of every single planet under the Shi'ar. And so here is the Imperial Guard, right? And they all had different abilities, from telekinesis to flight, laser vision, super strength, whatever the case was, energy manipulation. And so these guys were the strongest members of the Shi'ar, and the Shi'ar would kind of come to be its own race, um, involved in the. They were the ones. If you guys ever watched Dark Phoenix, they're the ones involved with Jean's death, as well as I'm pretty sure in the movie it was those bird people, because technically the Shi'ar are bird people, but it's so weird in that movie the way they wrote them in. But whatever. Um, but as they developed in a small section of the universe, reality kind of started to change for a different planet. This planet was known as Zenn-La, and it served as a beacon of technological superiority. So every planet is super highly advanced except for like our planet, but Zenn-La is pretty much shrouded in mystery. But they developed like the three races above did, right? However, with the rise of a man named Thrawn, the Saint of Science, it led to a fading of religion, right? Meaning that unlike them, they didn't have a need for conquering under a religion, right? And they turned to science. For Zenn-La, like he had a change in science, and told the people to not use faith or mystery as a driving factor, but things that they could physically see. And so on Zenn-La, there was no more hunger, there was no more poverty, no more disease, and it was a literal paradise. And so they started to chart the universe, chart the stars. But once they did, they returned with no purpose. Literally a whole void in society. So what they ended up doing was literally killing themselves or secluding themselves, or I guess I can't say that. They were unaliving themselves. Sorry, I'm literally not allowed to say that on chat. But um, they, they deleted living.exe. Anyway, many turned to like illegal substances, which I don't know. I guess it's not illegal on Zenn-La because it's a different planet. They turned to drugs, and unaliving themselves, deleting the life package from themselves, and they realized they're like, well, there's all of space. There's nothing else for us to learn, right? But they didn't know what was going on in space, right? They weren't monitoring it because they just kind of like charted it and were like, well, it's over. So what ends up happening is your boy Galactus comes, right? Galactus is there and he's kind of tired. Bro's been searching and he's kind of like, I'm really tired. And he's Zenn-La's face to face and he's like, I gotta eat you guys, right? But what he doesn't know is there is one person, a brilliant scientist born to another brilliant scientist named Norrin Radd. Super cool dude, right? And while everyone saw Galactus as the end, Norrin saw a chance to save his planet, and he wanted a ship so that he could have an audience with Galactus. And so here is Norrin Radd, and he makes a deal with Galactus, the Devourer. He said, I will search for your planets. I'm sure you're very weak traveling the universe, and every time you go, you barely have enough to keep going. So I will become your herald. I will look for planets for you that are life-bringing and similar to mine, that you can eat, and you don't have to wander looking for them. So that, biologically this makes sense, right? When you look at an animal, like a cheetah or something, it drains all its energy killing its prey, and then it gains that energy back from eating and resting, right? Here, he literally doesn't need to kill his prey anymore. He has someone going there, or I guess he doesn't have to hunt it. He has someone going there for him, and then he'll go there, like directly there. He doesn't have to look for it. He'll go straight there, consume the planet, and then move on, right? And then the Herald will go and he'll go there. He doesn't have to wander anymore and look for his, like stalk and hunt his prey down, right? So Norrin made a bet, a promise or a deal with Galactus, and he promised to spare Zenn-La, and in return, Galactus would make him his herald, and he would look for planets for him to eat. And so he transformed Norrin because he couldn't live in a tiny spaceship, and he gave him the power cosmic, turning him into the Silver Surfer. And here they are, Galactus and the Silver Surfer. Um, but yeah, we from there we turn our heads back to Earth. So we continue our discussion with the Eternals, and there were those that were living on Titan. So prior to the Eternals abandoning Earth, right before that whole celestial deviant war that caused the Eternals to leave, you know, um, they found themselves being led by two different beings, right? Kronos and Uranos on their sky planet or whatever, their sky village kingdom. And so you had one that was a force for love, Uranos, and or I think it was shit, I think that was Kronos. Oh yeah. Kronos loved peace and Uranos loved war, right? And so Uranos was like, let's go and leave, right? Because we want war. We want nothing but war. And they abandoned Earth and headed to Titan. And then um on Titan they landed, but the Eternals, even with all their might, they were still human. And the Elder God, one of the Elder Gods, the Dragon of the Moon, who claims responsibility for Thanos, he is not responsible for Thanos. That is Lady Death. Incited the war between Uranos and his people, right? And they all went to war. And if it literally wasn't for one lady, Suisan, the entirety of Uranos' men would have been destroyed. And she was later met by the Eternal, who like the Eternal groups that left after the Deviant Celestial massacre, and Suisan and those Eternals would begin to mate, right? And they would regrow and repopulate Titan, turning it into a safe haven for Celestials where they could watch over humanity. However, their species would develop a supercomputer, Isaac, and Suisan would mate with one person, a Lars. And now this is where things get good, right? They have their kids. Firstborn, Eros of Titan, right? And super cool dude. Eros would later be known as Star Fox, the Eternal and Avenger. And then they had planned to name their other child Dione. But the child was born with deviant syndrome. And so I will explain that after I explain the child Dione. The Suisan, seeing their child and seeing how hideous it was, right, because it had deviant syndrome, rejected the name Dione because it was purple and hideous and ugly, and she named the child Thanos because it literally looked like a ball of death. And as a son of a Lars, who literally thought that Thanos was worthy enough to rule because of how smart he was, Suisan looked at him and attempted to kill him, but she was ended up later brought to a mental hospital. Thanos would spend his time playing with Eros, and he would be kind of passive. He'd be like a little good boy, playing with his brother and chilling and bingling, But little is known if the Moon Dragon was the one manipulating, but Thanos was where Thanos was. There was a popular belief that there's this little girl, right, who was manipulating him, and this little girl would later be known as Lady Death. But she became obsessed with she was obsessed with death, right? Thanos was obsessed with the concept of death. But he was a pacifist. He literally would not kill anything. But he was obsessed with the girl who told him like, "Yo, why don't you and your friends go like hang out?" And so they would leave and play in this cave. And so Thanos was forced to go play with the caves, and the cave collapsed, and all his friends fell, and Thanos was literally forced to watch as these lizards inside the cave literally ate his friends. And so the girl, he left home, he went home, and the girl told him like, you have to go back and kill those animals, right? And so he took a knife, went to the cave, and like any known serial killer in the world, the first kill is always an animal because they're always helpless, and he starts just wrecking in on these animals, killing them all. And this led Thanos to going around and kidnapping different creatures in an effort to figure out why he was different from everyone else. He is literally purple, and everyone else looks like you and me. So why is he different? And so in his teenage years, he began to experiment with other members of his race, and he killed 17 people, including people in his class and eventually his own mother. And as he killed, his ideas began to change from research to one of a literal desire to kill. and he abandons his home and leaves to explore the universe, right? So I'll explain Deviant Syndrome real quick, and then I'll get back to where we are with Thanos because there's a bit of a time skip between them. So Deviant Syndrome is a um is a disease where there exists a genetic predisposition among the Eternals' Deviant Syndrome, and the syndrome is a mutation. So when you're born, you're an Eternal with the powers of an Eternal, but you look like a Deviant and have the powers of a Deviant, right? You're you gain like their heightened abilities and you kind of look like them, but you're still an Eternal and you have the powers of the Eternals and you clearly came out of two Eternals, but you're still also kind of looking like a Deviant. Now, what does this mean? For everyone wondering, yes, Thanos is a human, technically, because he is part Eternal, and the Eternals were from Earth, making him part human. Like a good percentage of human, like 80% human, 85% human. Yep. Congratulations. I'm pretty sure that that probably may or may not have ruined Infinity War more for you guys or Endgame. But we'll finish off with Thanos' kind of backstory here, as this part kind of takes place during like 1945. So we'll cut back to like what's going on Earth in like these years, in between these years. Um, because we're kind of watching Thanos grow up. He's an Eternal, so he has prolonged longevity of life, so he lives longer than most people do. But around this point in Thanos' life, he's matured. He's an older person, and this is around 1945. So as he grows older, he's in the Crab Nebula, and he would feel nothing, as he would literally go to different planets, bang women, have kids, go to war, kill people. He felt nothing, literally like no attachment to anything, and his mind was always set to that little girl on Titan. And so he continued his work, and he came into contact with a band of pirates. And so these pirates don't care who they are. He kills their captain and takes them back where he would you know, be the leader of their crew. And um when he returned to Titan, he re-encountered the girl, and the girl demanded that Thanos prove his loyalty. So he began his journey to kill his offspring and raise the planets that he went to. And on upon doing so, he would kill a bunch of different people. He'd go across the galaxy, raising and killing. He'd augment his body so that it would have like greater power and he could be stronger. And um, the girl then revealed to Thanos that for her to love him, Thanos would literally need to become a god, a supreme destroyer. And Thanos was like, "Why can't my crew see you?" And so she revealed herself and the reason why he needed to become a god. It was the literal personification of death, Lady Death, that was in front of him. And he went mad and promised Death to, like, that he would kill for love, for her love, right? And he began his attack by bombarding Titan from space. He blow up Titan from space. And Alars, Alars stopped him. So he went down to Earth to finish everyone off. And Alars told him, like, "I can't see this person. Are you actually, like, can you actually see her? Is she real there? Is she really there? Or are you like a demented, like, crazy dude who's now into killing?" Right? And at this point is where you can call Thanos the Mad Titan, because he is mad, like crazy, and he's from Titan. So the Mad Titan. And Thanos literally spared his dad's life for the sole purpose of watching him destroy the cosmos to prove Death's reality, that she is a real person. And he finally gained Death's embrace. He finally got to kiss Death, but it was cold, and he wanted more. And so Thanos would then amass an army where he kept watch on Earth as they developed nuclear weapons, right? And on Earth was a good item that we'll come back to seeing, the Cosmic Cube. And the Cosmic Cube was in the hands of Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM. Right, AIM had the Cosmic Cube. I'm pretty sure the Cosmic Cube isn't in this briefcase, but this is the only picture of AIM I could get with the I literally googled AIM Cosmic Cube and I got this, and it was like the best picture I could get. And he seized control over the Cosmic Cube. He came to Earth and took it, and with it he used the power to wish for control over the universe. He literally became omnipotent. Here's him holding the Cosmic Cube, and there's a Jawa back there. I'm sure that's Lady Death, but it kind of looks like a Jawa. It's pretty funny. Um, so Thanos literally became a god and had to fight the Avengers with alongside the Kree Captain Marvel, where Thanos literally believed he had drained the Cosmic Cube of all its energy and tossed it away, right? And when he fought them, Marvel ended up hitting it and willed the universe back to the way it was. Thanos reverted to his immortal self and was like teleported to the center of the universe, where his flagship, the Sanctuary 2, would pick him up, and he would go. Lady Death would then, at that point, hate his guts for his failure, and he would lose any chance of having any emotional attachment to Lady Death, right? Again, we turn our heads to space, and while all of these spaces are growing, you turn your head to the Phoenix Force. However, unlike Galactus or Eternity or Infinity, who exist in the said universe, they exist in every single multiverse, right? The Phoenix exists only in the main universe, right? She travels the main universe, right? As a nexus for every single psychic being. And so, in another realm, there's a man named Necrom, right? And he's the sorcerer supreme of that realm, and he's using his powers to manipulate the Phoenix to make pillars to allow for crossing between the multiverse, right? And then converge those realities so that he can absorb the Phoenix Force and become a god. And this is Necrom doing so. However, he had two students, Merlin and Pharaon. No, this is not Merlin, the guy that makes the Ebony Blade. Different Merlin. But yes, he is still a sorcerer. No, he is not from Camelot. And so they make, Merlin and Pharaon discover his plans and beat him, and allows the Phoenix to remain in our universe and better and leave to better understand the lives of mortals. That's why it searches out for Jean Grey and anyone under the lineage of Jean. And so as a danger of Necrom, reached every multiverse, Merlin realized that there needs to be a means to protect the universe from other universes like Necrom. So Merlin confounded himself to the other world, a pocket dimension outside of space and time, and created the Omniversal Development Court to observe each universe and ensure their safety. So while we're doing this, on Earth, you have the Elder Gods, and the Elder Gods were all trapped away by Gaia, but they were trapped for 3 billion years, and they said, it's our time to play, right? We're coming in here. And so they formed what's known as the Octessence, right, to be able to leave and preserve their legacy on Earth. And so the Octessence was consisted of, I'm gonna butcher all of these names, but Farala, Sidorak, Bakthar, Akan, Ragador, Watum, Valor, and Kraken. Never mind, I got them all right. They're all spells on Doctor Strange's list, in case any of you wanted to know. The Crimson Bands of Sidorak, the Images of Akan, the Rings of Ragador, Wisps of Watums, Flames of Valor, Sword of Bakthar, I think is one of them. I don't know about Farala and Kraken, but I know that they're like different spells that Doctor Strange uses. Anyway, as they got together, they realized they couldn't fight themselves in another dimension, and they couldn't rule over anything in the other dimension. So they realized that they could put artifacts of their own design for humans to be able to worship, and then once one of them touched it, he would gain powers, and then it would allow for other humans to touch said artifact and gain powers, and then they could all go to war, right? They'd gain a fraction of said power, and so one of them, as we all know, would later be Cain Marko, aka the Juggernaut, right? And so these gems, or they're not really gems, they're different artifacts, would be the Binding Brazier of Balthak, the Crimson Crystal of Sidorak, the Fearsome Fist of Farala, the Ivory Idol of Akan, the Crystal Key of Kraken, the ringed ruby of Ragador, the verdant vial of Valtor, and the wondrous waterfall of Watum, right? And these would be the different artifacts that the gods would preserve. And so while they were there, on the other side in Egypt, Apocalypse ruled, and the gods began to rise, right? So you're looking at gods like Gaia, who had birthed 3 children, and this is kind of like the backstory a little bit to those secondary gods, if you will. But you have Gaia and this other god Ouranos birthed 3 children, and the 3 children were the Cyclopses, the Titans, and the Hectonaires. And this is literally in Greek like mythology. If you guys like are into Greek mythology, this is the pre of like Cronus and Zeus. But Ouranos had had ignored all except for the Titans and trapped the Cyclopses and the Hectonaires in Tartarus. And so Gaia asked the Titans to kill Ouranos, but they all ignored her except for Cronus, who actually ended up killing it, Ouranos. Before Ouranos could die, he cursed Cronus and stated that one day he'll die by the hands of his own son, just as he did. And so he refused to set his brothers free and took the throne of Mount Olympus for himself. And there, Cronus would eat his children and marry a woman named Rhea. And the two of them would birth Zeus. And so Gaia, kind of to not let Zeus get eaten, took Zeus and left and raised him as a warrior. And later, in adulthood, Zeus would free the Cyclopses and Hectonaires and go to war against Cronus, where Zeus would banish the Titans and their army to Tartarus, and there Hades, one of his brothers, would watch over Tartarus, allowing for Zeus to become the king of gods. And his first action was to send these eagles across Earth to understand and see where he ruled. Where Atlas was, the guy that held up the universe, or the Earth, or whatever, would be a place known as Atlantis, right? And this is important, right? And Atlantis was, like, it would be pretty much like a trading hub for the world. Like, the deviants would trade with a bunch of other people and whatnot, like the free people, as they would start to rise slightly. But Atlantis would serve as a trading outpost, and so these civilizations would rise around it, right? Like the area of Atlantis, and so they would go and discover things, and they discovered a place known as the Savage Land, which was in Antarctica, but it was a lush green area filled with animals and whatnot, specifically dinosaurs, and they would bring them back, and the Atlanteans would attempt, they'd bring them back, and they'd show them around, and look, they're literally riding dinosaurs here, but they couldn't explain to them that they were literally on, like, in the Arctic. Like, how are reptiles living in the Arctic? And so when the Deviant and Celestial War happened, the island literally sank, right? Underwater, remaining hidden from the land dwellers. And as time passed and humans developed on land, the society of Atlantis also began, as they may have lost all of their technology, but Atlantean priests would modify the genes of the people and allow for them to breathe underwater, where they remained for the rest of their lives. And here is the underwater city of Atlantis, led by King Namor and its people. Sorry. But yeah. And so, while this was happening above ground, you would see the rise of Meriden and Morgan Le Fay, the two strongest known magicians who would take residence in Great Britain, right after Atlantis would fall. And in Britain, Meriden agreed with, the Empire's transformation as a religious state, whereas Morgan Le Fay made a pact with Mordred, the son of the bastard son of King Atlantis, or King Arthur, sorry, Atlantis. And so Morgan Le Fay made that pact with Mordred and attempted to take the throne for themselves, but Meriden, he ends up rechristening himself as Merlin. Yes, this is the wizard Merlin who makes the Ebony Blade, who helps Arthur rule Camelot. And so, like I mentioned, he creates the Ebony Blade and chooses Sir Percy of Scandia to take the mantle, becoming the Black Knight. and to protect the kingdom of Camelot, which he did, becoming its greatest warrior. Here is Sir Percy, the Black Knight, and here is him wielding the ebony blade. However, what Sir Percy nor Merlin came to realize was that the ebony blade had a will of its own. Similar to the Soul Stone and other artifacts around, the ebony blade was forged through bloodshed and combat, and so the sword would corrupt the user and force them into this bloodthirsty rage where they always wanted to fight. They always wanted to go into battle. However, when Sir Percy, died during the fall of Camelot, his spirit would remain, aiding everyone who the sword deemed worthy enough to possess. So he would be there to aid them and allow them to rise. But while all of this is happening in England, down south in Africa, we find the second generation of gods. They began their own following, and so in Egypt, originating in Egypt, but being a god for all of Africa, we see the rise of the panther goddess Bast, right? In case you guys wanted to know, for those who have seen Moon Knight, Bast and Khonshu are cousins. The Black Panther and Moon Knight are, I guess, second cousins. Anyway, so we turn to Africa, where about 10,000 years ago from modern day, this meteorite ends up crashing in through the atmosphere, and you have scattered debris going everywhere, a small fragment going to Antarctica, other parts going around. But whether it was sheer luck or divine intervention, the lump sum lands in an African nation known as Wakanda, and it was discovered by Bashenga and his nomads, right? And so the nomads and Bashenga believed it to be a gift from God and used it to forge their weapons. However, one half of Bashenga's tribe would start to mutate from the radiation giving off from the meteorite, and they would become demons cursed with rage. And so Bashenga prayed to Bast, the Panther goddess, for aid, and there Bashenga was transformed with the powers of the Black Panther to be able to defeat the demons. And Bashenga would later become the protector of Wakanda, using and the Vibranium Mound, where he would keep Wakanda hidden from the rest of the world, and maintaining his Panther powers, which he would pass down through generation. And so, while all this was happening on Earth, up in space, or I guess in the sky, you would see the Sky Fathers, which are the second gods, banding together, and they would use their powers like Bast did to infiltrate the lives of mortal men, right? Like they mentioned in Moon Knight. However, when the Celestials returned for a third time to judge Earth, Judgment Day is here, they realized that the gods were interfering with the lives of the mortal men, and they told them, if you don't want to be destroyed, you have to stop interfering with the lives of the men. So the Skyfathers agreed to live, and their stories became myths, right? Simple tales, right? Which is why people kind of like pray and faith, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we turn to the 12th century. Towards the end of the Crusades and the fall of Camelot, towards a man named Bennett du Paris, who fought in the Crusades and was doing his power, like doing his best to gain power and recognition during the Crusades, but literally fighting for no wealth. He was literally driven by ambition, and had heard of a being in Egypt of untold power. And so he met this voice, and they asked if he wanted to give up who he was to become something better, right? There, his mutant abilities were born, and the main ones being telepathy and telekinesis. I will explain his 2-page paper on powers later. But what he didn't know was that the man responsible for giving his power was Apocalypse. So he was forced to fight Sir Percy, and later, when he turned, he realized that he could fight Apocalypse, and later, would take on Apocalypse. But it was an absolute bloodbath, and I'm about to show you the list of powers that he has here. It's literally 2 pages of powers. He was literally mopped by Apocalypse, like absolutely devastated by Apocalypse. If you guys think Apocalypse is just some dude, I'm telling you, bro, this guy has mountains and mountains of powers. And this guy with an entire list of powers here could not stop Apocalypse. Ready? So, His powers include telekinesis, intuitive aptitude, meaning he can assemble things and unassemble things with his mind, force fields and concussive blast, electromagnetic blast, telekinetic flight, meaning he can lift himself up with his mind and fly at speeds of Mach 2, like a fighter jet. Telekinetic healing, meaning he can like repair and heal minds. Tactile telekinesis, superhuman durability, disease immunity, a regenerative healing factor like Wolverine's. Advanced longevity, meaning he lives longer than anyone else. Teleportation, empathy, meaning he can alter the emotions of people. Telepathy, and his telepathic abilities involve telepathic tracking, meaning he can track people through their psionic energies. Heightened awareness, kind of like Spider-Man's Spider Sense. A telepathic cloak to hide himself. Mind control, telepathic illusions, mind possession, mind alteration, a psionic shield. Mental paralysis, where he temporarily paralyzes someone's mind. Psionic blasts, astral projections, absorption or absorbing of information. He's an intuitive multilingual, meaning he can speak any language, and has psionic vampirism, meaning he can steal other people's like mind powered energy. His name, as you would come to know, is what the fuck was his name? I didn't write his name. The fuck was his name? Exodus. Yeah, that's what it would be. His name would be Exodus. This is him in the current Marvel continuity. He is currently one of the three heads of Apocalypse, serving the Quiet Council on Krakoa. If you guys don't know what that means, you don't have to. It is current X-Men, um, which I can cover if you guys want. It's actually pretty cool. But while we have society there, we turn to society in Asia, specifically a mystical city in Tibet known as Kamar-Taj, where a boy named Yao was born as a farmer, right? And Yao was greeted by a man named Kalu. And Kalu shared his secrets of sorcery with Yao as the two explored the secrets of sorcery together, journeying through the realm of the mystic arts and learning all there is to learn about magic before returning to Kamar-Taj with spells of immortality and the removal of disease and poverty, turning Kamar-Taj into a mystical, highly advanced society with no disease and no hunger and no poverty. But as Kalu learned sorcery, so did his lust for power begin to rise, and he used his abilities to control the minds of the locals, where he and Yao began to fight in mystical combat, before they laid waste to Kamar-Taj, where Yao wins and banishes Kalu to the dimension of Sidorak. And so Yao would, after the fight, Yao would rename himself the Ancient One, where he would seek to teach others the secret arts of sorcery himself, right? And so while the Ancient One would rise in Kamar-Taj, waiting for his encounter with Dr. Stephen Strange, we focus to the 19th centuries with one of the most dangerous villains ever to rise. Now, remember back when I told you about that time travel shit? It's all one big circle. And here is the conclusion of said circle. Right? We are in England, specifically London, where Charles Darwin has just discovered the theory of evolution. And while many saw him as a crazy dude, like, how could we be evolved from apes? We're creatures of God, blah, blah, blah. There was one who was even crazier than him. He would take it a step further, believing that humans were destined to evolve again with more powerful, and those homo superior men may even walk among us already. This man was named Nathaniel Essex, and he was a renowned biologist, right? In his childhood, he would attend, in his, yeah, sure, childhood, he would attend Oxford University, where his worldview was wildly different from those around him. He believed that gods and religion was like many people believed that God and religion was their purpose, but Essex purpose in life was was different. It was in the belief of evolution, and he believed that, like I said earlier, humanity was on the verge of evolution, and some may even walk among us. However, because of this crazy theory, Essex was denounced from Oxford, as well as he also kind of like did experiments on the dead, and so everyone was like, "Oh my God, what a crazy dude!" Blah, 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 blah. So anyway, um, he didn't know he was being watched, and while traveling the world and living for centuries, Apocalypse was unaware of his background, and so he disguised himself as En Sabanur, a benefactor from Egypt who was visiting London and was interested in Essex's work. So Apocalypse came to realize that his powers didn't come from the gods like he had believed to be, but from a mutation in his genes. And so Apocalypse offered Essex the opportunity to continue his work without aging, and so he used his powers to change Nathaniel Essex, who was no longer Nathaniel Essex, but a being known as Mr. Sinister, and here he is, Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse, right? And while Essex would continue his experiments in London, we shift our attention to North America, specifically a boy to be born, another mutant, James Howlett. And this boy would be born in Alberta, Canada, to the groundkeeper, in Alberta, Canada, in the year 1885, to Elizabeth Howlett, whore, infidel, traitor, and the groundskeeper Thomas Logan, where because of the infidelity of Elizabeth, James was wildly ignored by his legitimate father, John Howlett Jr., and his mother, Elizabeth, right? And so he was sent off to live with his grandfather, who would beat his child, believing that abuse and a harsh upbringing would lead him to become a man and that it was necessary. And so James would spend a lot of his time, his youth, playing with Rose and Dog, who was the actual biological son of Thomas. Um, but as they grew and became adults, um, their attention shifted because they're guys. Their attention shifted to that of romantic relationships, and they were both kind of interested in Rose. So we turn to Dog, and yes, his name is literally Dog. His dad, um, Thomas Logan, literally gives no shit about his son, beats him, and calls him Dog. Like, hey, Dog, come get me a beer. Hey, Dog, come get this beating. Literally doesn't care about his child. So, Dog, being beaten and not understanding how romance works, forced himself onto Rose, and so it led to both Dog and Thomas being removed from Howlett Estate. They're like, you guys can't live here if you're gonna like start raping people, bro. So Thomas got drunk and ends up coming home and murdering James's father, John, right? The owner of the estate, who James believed to be his father. And so he murders John in front of James, and under the immense stress and rage, James's powers grew as bone claws would develop from his hands, and a healing factor would arise, where James would then kill Thomas and leave his home with Rose. The two would go into hiding, and Rose would say that he would need to change his name to something that wasn't James Howlett, because they would be looking for a James Howlett. So Rose told him to began calling him Logan, after the monster who raped her and the guy that killed James's father. Because just like James, or I guess just like Dog and Thomas, James too was also a monster now. And James, with his bone claws and his healing factor, would become the mutant that we all know and love, Wolverine. Yep. And so we dial it back a little bit to the 11th century with a man named Minamoto no Yorimoto. And now this is a real person in Japan. And he founded the shogun, as well as the Japanese ruling class, with the emperor or the king on top and the peasants at the bottom. Now, some of the peasants were like, hey, I don't like this. So they left and chose to head for the mountains of Iga and Koga, where they practiced the arts of ninjutsu, right? There, their offsprings would be passed down this knowledge, where in 1588, they would be bound together by one ruler, Kaganobu Yoshioka, right? If you guys have seen Daredevil or the Defenders on Netflix, now on Disney Plus, this is Kaganobu. right? And the group would come together to be known as the Hand, right? And the Hand coveted power. They would infiltrate governments and assassinate others, right? And so this is pretty much what was happening up until the 17th century. And at the start of the 17th century on Earth was the start of the Industrial Revolution. And so, as technology evolved, we head back to our biological friend Sublime, the little bacteria that I told you was going to be a major factor in World War II. Sublime, right? And he was moving from host to host, scheming and sowing chaos around everywhere he went. However, with the rise of mutants, Sublime realized that he couldn't infect humans. He couldn't enter the host of humans. So, he decided that it was time for him to lay his plans, right? For a new program, Weapons Plus, right? And the idea was we're going to create some super soldiers here, right? So, World War One breaks, and Sublime realizes that it's time for him to infiltrate. He merges with a body that he names John, and they begin to manipulate intelligence agencies around the United States. And so, with World War One being a big threat, he goes to the U.S. and he's like, "Hey, I need you to fund my experiments so that we can have like superhumans, so that if there's ever another world war, we can end the fight with superhumans, right?" And so the U.S. government is like, "You're in." And so Sublime starts to, you know, use his funds, literal blank check given from the United States government, to fight um or create superhumans. And with the rise of World War II and Hitler, he realized that he needed to find someone that could help him, like a scientist, where he ends up having Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos kidnap Dr. Erskine, and there Erskine uses his abilities to develop the super soldier serum. Right, he uses his scientific prowess to develop it, and he goes through a bunch of different candidates, finally setting on Steven Rogers, who is the first successful test subject of Weapons Plus, and become Captain America. If you guys don't know, he is Weapon 1. By the time they reach Weapon 10, that is Wolverine, Weapon X, right? And so here is John Sublime with a brain filled with different fucking vats of chemicals. But while we have Captain America's rise on one end, you have Johann Schmidt's rise on the other. And he was born to a drunken father and his mother who had died on childbirth. And so Herman, his drunken father, tried to kill him, but the doctors ended up saving him and bringing him to an orphanage where he would literally just leave at the age of 7 to become a street beggar and thief. But later in his life, he would be employed by a Jewish shopkeeper who would literally also mistreat him. The only person in his life that ever treated him right was the Jewish shopkeeper's daughter, Esther. And as he grew, his lust for Esther grew too. And so he forced himself on her, which had him rejected. And later on, he ended up coming back and murdering Esther. And this ended up sparking a bloodlust in him, which allowed for his rage to be vented out via murder, right? Later in his life, Schmidt needed a master, right? Someone that can show him the ways of power. And by chance, he was working at a hotel that Hitler was staying in. And he brought refreshments to Hitler. And Hitler was having his conversation with a Gestapo member saying, "I can teach this bellboy to be a better person than you, do a better job than you." And Hitler looked down into Schmidt's eyes and was like, "This is it. This is the play," right? And so, he took him as a subordinate and trained, and they started training, but when he was training under the SS, they're like, "No, no, no, this isn't what I want. I'll personally train him." And Schmidt, eager to do his bidding, would become his very first subordinate, only listening to Hitler, and he was later then given a lifelike skull mask and would become the Red Skull, right? The skull only answered to Hitler, and throughout World War II would be sent off to do fear-mongering missions prior to the rise of Captain America. Hitler, being proud of his creation, gave Schmidt a bunch of secret bases with high-tech equipment and whatnot, and a bunch of different weapons, including one that can control human minds, known as the Nullitron, as well as one that encircled areas of the world, causing like certain areas to be like suspended in animation. And the Skull was particularly interested with certain technological weapons like the Nullitron, that he could use to conquer the world, right? Which Hitler didn't want to, like, or conquer. He wanted to destroy it, right? So the Skull ended up building sleeper agents around the world, in the form of like giant robots, and um, Hitler would then admire the Skull, but Schmidt would start to kidnap those different like Third Reich agents that were like of high power that he deemed to be like worthy, right? And so one of them being Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, who would have a falling out with Hitler and then move to Japan to join the Hand. There, a splinter cell of the Hand would leave with Strucker to be to form the group known as Hydra. Hydra was not started by the Red Skull; it was started by Baron Strucker, and later he would become Hydra, the supreme Hydra ruler, and Hitler would eventually later on in his life succeed and take over Hydra. Or I'm sorry, the Red Skull would. I don't know why I put that. Hitler would. The Red Skull would later succeed and take over Hydra. This has been the course of Marvel's universe. Now, of course, there's a bunch of other characters that I didn't cover that are involved in World War II. I wanted to cover just up until the Fantastic Four, where the FF were like Marvel's first band of superheroes that we know everything on from that point forward. But there were a couple of characters that I didn't want to cover, like the Human Torch, the mechanical one, Namor the Submariner, Bucky Barnes, right? There is a group of superheroes from World War II uh, whose names elude me. Wolverine. Um, this is definitely not it. There's a like. Oh, the Liberty Legion. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Liberty Legion. And so there'd be a bunch of different people. If you guys have seen that like old school Spider-Man cartoon, the meh, 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 you know what I'm talking about if you know the theme song. Um, the Liberty Legion was definitely in it. Towards the end, they had a bunch of different characters. I'm pretty sure this yellow guy is the Quickster. I'm 100% sure that his name is the Quickster. Um, but yeah, it's pretty funny. You have a bunch of different characters. They all have like different cool powers. Um, but there's a couple of these characters that I didn't want to cover for the sole purpose of covering them in future episodes. But that's been this episode of Marvel Buddies. It's pretty much run around 2 hours. But like I mentioned, I will in the future promise to cover those characters that have been like I have a list of characters that I'm covering. Here, let me see if I can pull it up on my other monitor. Um, let's see. Okay. Silver Samurai, Jury, Blade, Captain Marvel, Venom, Cosmo the Dog, Deadpool, Thanos, the Eternals, like individually, Crossbones, Taskmaster, Tony Masters, Howard Stark, Iron Man, and I I have a couple other. Let's see. King the Conqueror, Iron Fist. I kind of want to redo Shang-Chi. I might do Secret Wars. I definitely have to do Groot sometime this week, or this upcoming week. I'm trying to think. Purple Man, Iron Fist, All New Avengers. I might have a couple other characters. I might do like Elektra and the Defenders as I kind of want to get into that Defender cast. But that's pretty much been this week's episode of Marvel Buddies. This has been kind of like a whole of the entire universe subject for Marvel kind of situation. Where I've been wanting to talk about Marvel's kind of like expanded universe. Um, but yeah, that's been me this week. I promise to bring those characters that you guys had requested before. I'll do them now this week, and yeah, if you guys have Any other questions, comments, or concerns, you can feel free to email me at marvelbuddies, marvelousmarvelbuddies at gmail.com. The YouTube channel is up. This will eventually go up on that channel as well as the forums for you guys to vote. They're listed at the top if you guys want to vote on any characters. Um, but yeah, that's been Marvel Buddies this week. I hope you guys all have a good rest of your night, and I'll see you guys around.